The 3 signs you're being lied to, truth lies beneath. Have you ever walked into a room and felt something was off? Not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't? It's strange, isn't it? The human brain, for all its logic and rationality, is often more sensitive to subtle inconsistencies than it is to outright falsehoods. That's where this all begins. Lies are not always loud. They don't always slap you in the face. More often, they whisper. They hide in silence, in the slight hesitation of a response, in the things people choose to leave unsaid. And the first sign you are being lied to is this: a distortion in your perception of reality that your intuition notices before your logic can explain. Now, let's unpack that. You see, deception isn't just about words, it's about how we're made to feel. When someone lies to us, they're not just changing facts, they're altering the structure of the reality we're building together in that moment. That's why it feels so personal. That's why betrayal cuts deeper than a misstatement. It distorts your sense of what's real. We don't just hear lies, we experience them. And the most dangerous lies aren't the ones told to us, they're the ones we begin telling ourselves to make sense of what others have done to us. Think about this. What if every time someone lied to you, they weren't just hiding the truth, but actively rewriting your understanding of the world? When your partner says, "I'm fine," but you sense sadness behind their eyes, or when your boss says nothing's wrong, but avoids your gaze, something inside you knows. But we often dismiss that inner voice. Why? Because we fear the implications. We fear that acknowledging deception means confronting uncomfortable truths, that someone we trust is not who we thought they were. So we rationalize, we excuse, we silence our instincts. But here's the paradox. The more we suppress our intuition, the more susceptible we become to manipulation. The first sign of being lied to, then, is not in the liar. It's in your own internal dissonance. It's the moment your gut screams something's wrong while your mind tries to find a reason to stay calm. This is the first battleground of truth inside you. Ask yourself, when was the last time you felt something was off but ignored it? Why did you ignore it? What did it cost you?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Let's go deeper. Philosophers like Kierkegaard and Nietzsche warned us long ago that truth is not always convenient, and more importantly, that the human ego has an astonishing capacity for self-deception. We prefer a comfortable lie over a painful truth. That's not weakness, it's survival. But survival isn't the same as living authentically. And if we want to live truthfully, we must begin by honoring the quiet voice inside us that detects lies before our intellect catches up. Imagine this. You're in a conversation with someone you care about. They smile, they nod, they say all the right things. But something doesn't align. Their words and their energy don't match. That's the moment you're being lied to. Not necessarily with malice, but with fear. People lie because they're afraid of consequences, of rejection, of vulnerability. But their fear becomes your confusion. And if you're not careful, that confusion will turn into your reality. So the first sign is this: when your inner and outer worlds fall out of sync. When your instincts say one thing and your mind scrambles to justify another. This is where you must pause, not react. Pause, sit in that discomfort, question it, respect it, because that discomfort might be the only honest thing in that moment. And here's the twist. Sometimes we are the ones doing the lying to ourselves. We lie to protect ourselves from truths we don't want to face. We stay in relationships that feel wrong because we're afraid of loneliness. We stay in jobs that drain us because we fear failure. We tell ourselves, it's not that bad, even when everything inside us is screaming otherwise. So the first sign you're being lied to might be coming from within. And if we can't be honest with ourselves, how can we ever hope to detect dishonesty in others? Let me ask you this. What lie are you living with right now, just to keep the peace? And what would happen if you stopped pretending it was true? Because here's the reality. The truth doesn't vanish just because we ignore it. It waits. It waits in the background, quietly influencing our decisions, shaping our relationships, and building the foundation of a life that may not be ours at all. And eventually, when we least expect it, it surfaces, not as a revelation, but as a crisis, the moment when everything we've been avoiding comes crashing down. So, if you're feeling that subtle misalignment in your life, if something deep down doesn't feel right, don't look away. That discomfort is sacred. It's the compass pointing you back to your own truth. And recognizing that is the beginning of liberation. The mask of certainty, why overconfidence is the second sign you're being lied to. There's something seductive about certainty. It wraps us in a warm blanket, assuring us that we're safe, that we understand the world, that the people around us are who they claim to be. But the second sign you're being lied to is hidden beneath this very illusion, overconfidence, not just in others, but in yourself, in your assumptions, in the stories you've decided to believe. Because when someone lies to you and delivers that lie with absolute confidence, your own mind often bows in submission, not because it's weak, but because it's wired to trust conviction. That's the danger. Overconfidence creates a psychological mirage. It presents the illusion of truth, cloaked in the tone of authority, the rhythm of certainty, the ease of seamless storytelling. Liars know this. They speak with clarity, with unwavering purpose, with eyes steady and voices smooth. They know that uncertainty raises questions, and questions lead to doubt. So they eliminate the hesitations, they simplify the narrative, and in doing so they exploit a cognitive shortcut in your brain, what psychologists call the illusion of explanatory depth. The brain, when confronted with a confident explanation, stops investigating. It relaxes, it trusts. But here's where it gets philosophical. Plato warned us in the Republic that the greatest form of ignorance is not knowing that we are ignorant. Overconfidence, then, is not just a trait of the liar, it's a condition we accept when we choose comfort over inquiry. And this isn't just about deception in relationships or politics or media. This is about how we construct our entire worldview. We crave certainty because uncertainty is terrifying. It reminds us that we're small, that we don't know as much as we think we do, that reality is far more complex than we're prepared to handle. And so, when someone offers certainty, especially in a moment of confusion, we take it like medicine, even if it's poison. Let's be brutally honest. How many times have you believed someone simply because they spoke with authority? A teacher, a parent, a partner, a leader. How often have you silenced your own doubts because the person in front of you was so sure? And more importantly, how often have you faked that same certainty, lying to others or yourself just to maintain control or avoid vulnerability? This is the paradox of overconfidence. It's both a signal and a shield. It signals that someone may be lying, but it also shields them from suspicion. That's why it's so dangerous. It doesn't just deceive, it disarms. When someone lies with hesitation, with guilt, with fragmented stories, we question them. But when they lie with confidence, we admire them. We see them as leaders, as decisive, as clear-headed. And in doing so, we allow the lie to take root not just in our minds, but in our systems, our relationships, our institutions. But let's flip the mirror for a moment. What about the lies we tell with confidence? The ones we tell ourselves so often that they become indistinguishable from truth. I'm fine. I'm in control. I know what I'm doing. These phrases, repeated like mantras, protect us from the chaos of doubt, but they also imprison us in illusions. And the deeper we sink into those illusions, the harder it becomes to ask the most important questions. What if I'm wrong? What if I've been lied to and didn't even notice? What if everything I'm certain about is just the story I've chosen to tell myself? You see, the second sign you're being lied to isn't found in the words, it's found in the tone, the tempo, the emotional certainty of delivery. It's in the story that comes too easily, the facts that align too perfectly, the absence of hesitation. Truth is messy, it stumbles, it contradicts itself, it evolves. Lies, on the other hand, strive for perfection. They aim to close every gap, to answer every question, to leave no room for doubt. And when you encounter something or someone that seems too perfectly certain, too neatly packaged, that's when your alarm should sound. Confidence is not truth. Conviction is not evidence. And the person who insists they are right may be the very one who fears being wrong the most. So, I ask you this, what truths have you accepted simply because they were delivered with confidence? And what might you uncover if you dared to question them? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. They're not just lying to you. They're lying with your permission. You gave them access. You handed them trust. And each time you surrender your doubt in the face of their confidence, you build a wall between yourself and what's real. The second sign you're being lied to is when you stop asking questions, when you stop challenging certainty, when you stop being curious. And in that silence, deception thrives. Silence in the shadows, when truth is hidden in what's not said. There is a kind of lie that doesn't use words at all. It doesn't shout, it doesn't even whisper. It hides patiently in the empty spaces between what is spoken and what is left unsaid. And that is the third sign you're being lied to, a deliberate absence of truth where there should be presence. Silence as strategy, omission as weapon. It's easy to think of lies as active, dramatic acts of deception, but the most insidious lies are often passive. They reside in the gaps, in what someone doesn't tell you, in the story that's missing a chapter. You've felt this before, haven't you? Someone tells you a version of an event and everything seems fine on the surface, but later you discover a detail they never mentioned, and suddenly the whole narrative changes. You don't just feel deceived, you feel betrayed, because omission is not ignorance, it's a choice. And when someone chooses to withhold truth from you, they're not just lying, they're deciding what version of reality you get to live in. This kind of deception is more difficult to detect because it doesn't confront you directly. It evades, it avoids. It's the friend who never tells you they saw something questionable, the partner who conveniently forgets to mention a certain name, the co-worker who leaves out crucial context, and because they haven't technically lied, they can always retreat to plausible deniability. "I didn't say that," they'll argue, and they're right. They didn't. But that's exactly the problem. Philosophically, this brings us to an even deeper question. Is someone still lying if they simply allow you to believe a falsehood? Sartre might say yes, because truth, in its most authentic form, requires intention. If I know you're about to walk into a fire and I say nothing, I'm not innocent. My silence becomes complicity. The same holds true in emotional and relational spaces. If someone knows their silence will mislead you and they let it happen, they are crafting a lie with absence. And that, in many ways, is more manipulative than a direct falsehood, because it lets them hide behind the illusion of innocence. But here's where it gets even more profound. Sometimes we are the ones who silence ourselves. We feel something is off, we sense that something's missing, but we don't ask, we don't challenge, we don't press. Why? Because deep down we're afraid of the answers. We fear that asking the question will shatter the illusion we're clinging to. So we participate in our own deception. We become co-authors of the lie simply by choosing not to confront it. This raises a haunting question. How much of your life is built on things you've never questioned, simply because they weren't said out loud? How many truths are still waiting in the silence, never spoken but always known? Silence, in its deceptive form, is not just about others hiding things from us. It's about the systems we live in, the cultures we inherit, the norms we never question. Entire societies function on the foundation of unspoken agreements. We don't talk about certain injustices. We don't acknowledge certain histories. We don't ask about certain taboos. And in that silence, falsehoods flourish. The greatest lies of all are the ones we've accepted as normal, precisely because no one ever said otherwise. So, whether it's personal or collective, silence is not neutral. It is either the space where truth breathes or the void where it dies. And when you sense that something should have been said, but wasn't, that's the third sign you're being lied to. Not by what someone told you, but by what they didn't. Colonel, and perhaps more chillingly, by what you refused to ask. Let me ask you now, what truth have you chosen not to hear simply because no one said it out loud? And what would change in your life if you finally gave voice to the silence? Because the truth doesn't always scream. Sometimes it waits, quietly, in the shadows, behind the words that were never spoken. The final reveal. Truth is a choice, how to reclaim your inner compass in a world of deception. At the end of this journey, after peeling back the layers of distortion, manipulation, and silence, we arrive at a place that is both terrifying and liberating. The realization that truth is not something merely found, it is something chosen. In a world so saturated with illusion, where lies wear the face of honesty and silence masquerades as peace, the most radical act is not uncovering the lie, but deciding to live by the truth, even when it hurts, even when it isolates, even when it breaks everything you thought you understood. We often think of truth as absolute, a beacon waiting in the distance. But truth is not static. It is alive. It pulses through decisions, through relationships, through the stories we tell ourselves when no one is watching. And perhaps the most profound philosophical insight is this: You are not just a seeker of truth, you are its architect. Every time you refuse to numb yourself with denial, every time you ask the hard question, every time you listen to the quiet discomfort within, you are building a life grounded in something real. And that is rare, that is revolutionary. But here's the challenge. Once you start seeing the signs, once you recognize the distortion of intuition, the seduction of overconfidence, the manipulation of silence, you can't unsee them. The world doesn't suddenly become more honest. In fact, it becomes more painful. You begin to notice how often people lie to themselves to survive. You see how systems reward deception because it's easier than truth. You understand why so many people choose the comfort of illusion over the rawness of reality. And you begin to feel a strange kind of grief, not just for what you've lost, but for what you pretended not to see. Yet, in this grief, something extraordinary awakens, a compass, not the kind given to you by others, but one forged through your own willingness to confront what most people avoid. It's not infallible, it wavers, but it's yours. And when you follow it, even when the path is uncertain, you begin to walk in alignment with something deeper than opinion, deeper than fact, something that feels like soul truth. So now let me ask you the final and most important question of all. What would your life look like if you stopped lying to yourself? If you stopped accepting the lies of others?